Do you want to get into anime but don't know where to start? Do you finally want to understand what the hell all those memes on your Facebook and Tumblr are? Maybe you just have a friend that you want to watch anime but you don't want to explain it to them. Well, that's what this is here for. Welcome to Anime Explained, and today we're explaining The Boy and the Beast. The Boy and the Beast was made in 2015 by Mamoru Hosoda, the same guy behind Wolf Children and The Girl Who Left Their Time, so prepare your fills. We open with an 8-year-old boy by the name of Ren, whose mother recently passed away. He goes to live with his mother's family since his parents are divorced and his father has mastered instant transmission. He's gone. But Ren decides he hates them all before running away from home and screaming, "I hate everybody!" See? Oh, and his shadow becomes sentient. You know, average 8-year-old problems. He finds a fluffy thing that befriends him for giving it bread and ends up sitting alone on the sidewalk when two cloaked figures approach. The big one asks him where his parents are, which of course triggers Ren. Big Cloak then reaches down to get a better look at him and we see his bear arm, which happens to be a bear arm. He then tells Ren to join him before being ushered off by the smaller Cloak. Ren, of course, goes immediately to the police to tell them that Pedo Bear has broken free and is trolling the streets. Or, you know, instead just follows him down a dark alley. He exits the alley to find that he's suddenly at a furry convention and rightfully freaks out, running deeper into it. This kid really doesn't have common sense, does he? Or is he just like really bad at directions? Either way, he ends up getting caught by some wolf people, but somewhat ironically for a kid wearing a red accessory in a fairy tale land, he's saved from the wolves by a pigman. The pigman starts questioning him when Pedo Bear shows up with his little monkey out and recognizes the boy. We find out that Pedo Bear's real name is Kumatetsu, and that he wants to be the king of FurryCon, but that first he has to get an apprentice and defeat a warthog man in order to do it, and that he wants Ren to be that apprentice. The pig thinks that this is a bad idea, but bears outrank pigs in the circle of life, so Kumatetsu takes Ren back to his place anyways. There, Kumatetsu gives Ren a new name, Kyuta, and crashes out, leaving Ren to wander outside and hallucinate about his dead mother with Fluffy, who has claimed Ren's hair as his new home. The next morning, the two wake up and get into an egg argument. An argument, if you will. Which you shouldn't. So Ren/Kyuta runs off. He ends up coming across the best disguised human I've ever seen and stares at her for a while until the furry police capture him. Kumatetsu comes barreling through looking for him when he runs into Warthog Jesus. This guy's name is Iozan, and he's the other guy in the running to be king. Also, he's the father of another warthog person and the totally not human kid. He warns Kumatetsu that humans are dangerous because they harbor evil in their hearts and can lash out violently, unlike a bear. He insists that Ren be returned to our world, but Kumatetsu recently saw the Jungle Book and really wants his own Mowgli, so they fight. Each has their own sword, but we discover that at FurryCon all weapons must be sheathed. So they just kinda beat each other with their scabbards, while Ren sucker kicks a goat man and runs off. Meanwhile, Kumatetsu apparently isn't following fight etiquette and starts showboating as the fight is about to go off. Iozan beats him like he owes him money for a while until the fight gets serious and both fighters activate their steroid glands. The crowd begins cheering for Iozan, who starts tossing Baloo like a rag doll. Kumatetsu isn't giving up though and keeps trying to fight. It doesn't go well. Ren witnesses the beating of the bear and notices that literally no one is cheering for him, so he decides to be the lone voice on his side, cheering on Kumatetsu, giving him the strength he needs to get knocked out. The crowd cheers Warthog Jesus and the current king of FurryCon appears, a rabbit man named Lord Soshi. Rabbit Lord wants to know what's going on, and Iozan informs him that he wants Kumatetsu to be punished for bringing a human into the beast world, but Rabbit Lord is all lol, nope, and says he can keep the kid. The two head back home and Ren tells Kumatetsu that if he can train him to be bear strong, that he'll be his apprentice. The next day they wake up and begin training. Kumatetsu starts off by doing some airbending with a stick, and then tells Ren, now officially Kyuta, to try it. But Kyuta can't feel the sword in his soul, and Kumatetsu gets frustrated with him before storming off. The pigman tells Kyuta that Kumatetsu had no parents or master and had to learn everything on his own, so he doesn't know how to teach. Kyuta asks what he's supposed to do as his apprentice while he's gone, and Pigman tells him to do chores. Kyuta spends the next few days cooking, cleaning, and doing laundry when he runs into Iozan's sons, and gets beat up by the warthog before the totally not human son saves him. He heads back and Kumatetsu shows up only to make fun of him for losing. Kyuta snaps, telling Kumatetsu that he's lazy and stupid and that he deserves to lose to Iozan. Kumatetsu runs off into pure bear rage until he comes across Rabbit Lord, who tells him to go on a journey with Kyuta and meet the other lords. They do just that, asking each about strength and getting a bunch of different answers. Pigman talks to Kyuta and tells him that he's just gonna have to learn for himself how to be strong. And after another mommy hallucination, he decides to mimic everything that Kumatetsu does in order to learn from him. After a while of doing this, he realizes that he can tell what Kumatetsu is doing just by listening to his movements and decides to attack him. The two spar for a while, with Kyuta coming out the victor since he knows Kumatetsu's movements so well that he can counter everything he does. The two then decide to train one another, with Kyuta learning strength and Kumatetsu learning movement. And Kyuta eventually fights the warthog kid that beat him up earlier. He wins without any effort whatsoever and the two become instant friends, which is totally how that would play out in the real world. We time skip 9 years and find that Kyuta and Kumatetsu have gotten so good that they've begun taking on apprentices together. They get into an argument over who would be their apprentice, and Kyuta runs off, ending up back at the alley that brought him here. He heads back to Earth and visits a library, trying to teach himself to read again. He picks up Moby Dick, and a girl by the name of Kiede sees that he's struggling, so she starts teaching him. The two get made fun of by a group of kids from her school, who Kiede forces to leave. But when she returns, Kyuta is gone as well. She heads home only to find the bullies waiting for her outside. They bully her for a while, but Kyuta shows up and punches the souls out of their bodies. The two become friends, and over the next few months, he starts going back and forth from Furrycon to Earth in order to learn. Eventually, he decides to go to college and ends up finding his father's address from the admittance office. Somehow. And the two reunite. The father says that he looked for him for years and didn't know of his mother's passing. He apologizes and promises to be there for him, even offering him a place to stay. Kyuta considers taking him up on the offer. He heads back to tell Kumatetsu everything that's been going on, and Kumatetsu loses his mind over it. Kyuta says that he's going to move in with his father. Kumatetsu begs him not to go, but Kyuta isn't listening and runs back to Earth. There, he ends up going off on his dad for not being around and eventually ends up back where Kumatetsu found him. He sees his shadow from all those years ago. Remember that part? Yeah, that's back now. Anyways, he sees it and notices a huge gaping vortex hole in its chest, and freaks the hell out. He bolts to the library where Kiede is and starts screaming about being a monster before she gives him a good clean smack, followed by a hug. Yeah, this is gonna be a healthy relationship. She tells him that she's angry too and that everyone has darkness in them, but that you have to fight it, before giving him her lucky bookmark and tying it around his wrist. Kyuta decides to go back to Furrycon and finds out that the next day, Kumatetsu and Iozan are to fight. He goes to hang out with the Iozan sons before the fight, but the totally not human one takes him for a
walk in the woods,
and presumably sees a spider on his chest, since that's the only reason I can think of that he would be kicking him that many times. Turns out that the totally not human son has a vortex hole in his chest too, and Kyuta can see it. So the son that looked human, turns out, is human.
What a twist!
Oh, also, that's a boy. Let that settle for a while. Back at the fight, Rabbit Lord is presiding over the events as the two warriors are brought out all Russell Crowe style.
Are you not entertained?
Kumatetsu immediately goes all beast mode only to have Warthog Jesus show him the Passion of the Christ. Kyuta shows up and motivates Kumatetsu by calling him pathetic, which causes him to go bear mode and start fighting back. Warthog Jesus and Kumatetsu start sword fighting until Warthog Jesus' scabbard breaks and Kumatetsu knocks his sword out of his hand. It nearly decapitates Rabbit Lord before Kumatetsu uses his bare hands and knocks out Iozan for the win. He and Kyuta celebrate when out of nowhere the human son of Iozan, who we find out is named Ichirohiko, shows up and pokes the bear with his father's sword. Kumatetsu goes down and Kyuta loses his mind, picking up the sword with his crazy new Tetsuo powers and flings it at Ichirohiko. But just before he can land the killing blow, Fluffy saves the day by jumping on his face and making him see the bookmark that Kiede gave him earlier. He passes out and wakes up next to a nearly dead Kumatetsu. Rabbit Lord demands an explanation, and Iozan says that he went to the human world years ago and found a baby in the garbage, which I feel like is becoming a theme for this series. Anyways, he saved the baby and raised it as his own, only to discover that the darkness in his heart started to take over once he began to realize that he wasn't his father's true son. Kyuta decides to go after Ichirohiko, but is stopped by the pigman and the monkey, who beg him not to seek vengeance. He thanks them for helping raise him, but says he has to go. Not for vengeance, but because the same darkness that is in Ichirohiko is in him, and it must be stopped. He makes a pit stop back on Earth to say goodbye to Kiede and gives her his Moby Dick, but she refuses to leave his side, knowing that something is up. And that's when Ichirohiko shows up. He's gone full Darkheart mode and starts chasing the two down with his flood of evil. The duo barely escape but drop the book, which Ichirohiko finds. They hit the subway and Kyuta contemplates using his own darkness vortex to pull Ichirohiko into him and kill them both. Meanwhile, Lil Evil is up on the surface directing a Michael Bay film. Back at Furrycon, the world starts having a seizure and Kumatetsu decides that it's time to stop dying and help out. He decides to become a god because that's something you can just decide there. And we cut back to Kyuta. Ichirohiko has made his own Moby Dick and is chasing them with it when Kyuta tells Kiede to run, but she's all, nah, I'm gonna yell at that whale. This infuriates Ichirohiko, who tries to Moby Dick slap her. Kyuta's had enough of this guy's dick and decides to suck him down, but just as he's about to reach completion, a sword comes flying out of the sky and breaks his concentration. It turns out that Kumatetsu decided to become the sword in Kyuta's soul, and sent himself down to help out. Kyuta absorbs the sword into his gaping chest hole and Together they begin to read Ichirohiko's movements and counter him with one swift cut. The camera fades to black and Ichirohiko wakes up, healed with Kiede's bookmark tied around his wrist. Kyuta, meanwhile, is standing on a building as the sun rises talking to Kumatetsu, who, like any good pedo bear, now resides inside of him. He tells Kyuta that he'll always be there for him, and the two have a nice moment before we cut to Furrycon where a parade is being thrown in Kyuta's honor. Kiede shows up with college books and an application and Kyuta decides once again to be Ren, and lives his life on Earth with his father and Kiede. The pig and monkey narrate saying that he never picked up a sword again because the sword was now in his soul. We get a scene of him studying for college and Kumatetsu smiles from within, laughing. Cut to credits. Also, the end song talks about shooting the head of a monster with a shotgun, and is just super happy about it. Just wanted to point that out. The Boy and the Beast, regardless of how I described it, is actually a really heartfelt journey, with very likable characters and a truly beautiful story. If you're in the mood for something with a fire in its heart and a sword in its soul, then this is the movie for you. Thanks for watching. I've been ShintouGenesis with the Otaku Nexus, and if you want to see more from me, check out my personal channel right here, where I review anime and talk about storytelling.